Correct.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bill Bymel, and thank you for spending the next 20 minutes with me here today. I am going to go over some of my background, tell you a little bit about what my firm does. Then we're going to address what's going on in the real estate and mortgage markets, specifically from the perspective of a secondary mortgage market investor, and that's what we do. We'll then dig a little deeper into both commercial and residential loan data that we are seeing over the course of the last several months. And then we'll talk about what our firm does and what opportunities we see lying ahead. If there is time at the end, we will be sure to answer questions. So please feel free to enter those in the box below. As mentioned, my name is Bill Bymel, and I'm a managing director at Spurs Capital and a principal in First Lien Capital LP. I have been in the real estate and mortgage finance business for just under 2 decades. I grew up in South Florida, went to NYU Film School, and was living in South Florida for the last 18 years as well. I have been an investor in both residential and commercial real estate. I'm a partner in a commercial real estate advisory firm known as RSI. We mostly work with national brand restaurants such as Darden Restaurants, BJ's Restaurants, and major retailers in terms of expansion needs in the commercial world. And on the residential side, I became an investor in non-performing residential whole loans in 2009. At the turn of the last crisis. It really started in 2008, but we bought our first loan in 2009. Prior to that, I had experience as a fix and flip residential real estate investor. So I watched the last crisis unfold right on the sidelines, as I am now. My firm, Spurs Capital, is an investment manager that specializes in secured investments in real estate via the purchase of non-performing, sub-performing whole loans, primarily in residential real estate, all first liens, or we'll buy distressed real estate, either commercial or residential, and look for upside value that way. My team and I, my partners and I, have been working together since the last downturn. We have offices in New York City, Denver, Colorado, Los Angeles, California, and of course, Palm Beach, Florida. To date, we as a team have combined placed close to $1 billion of equity investments, primarily with institutional investment partners through various fund vehicles that we have set up over the years. Our current AUM is 106 million. So we've returned over 800 million of original investment dollars, plus over 100 million of net profits to our investment partners. We've gotten so good at what we do in terms of buying non-performing loans, sourcing them, and then managing them quickly and efficiently to a resolution, that many of the competitors in our business, big names in the industry that you would all know in the mortgage world, have hired us as third-party loss mitigation advisors. So we actually sit in a sub-servicing, sub-asset management role to some of the largest lending institutions and mortgage servicers in the country. What makes us special is we really are a Wall Street meets Main Street strategy. The secondary mortgage market, as you know, as you've heard of, is this mysterious world where liquidity is gained by selling loans or selling relatively illiquid assets from person to person, private entity to private entity, or sometimes public entities as well. But we take those relationships that we've established on Wall Street and we bring a Main Street loss mitigation approach to that. We really see ourselves as a lifeboat to borrowers in stress. And that's why I've titled the presentation, Our Solution to the Pending Foreclosure and Eviction Crisis. Let's start with March. Back in March, the COVID lockdown had started, and real estate and equity and real estate markets started to quiver. You can recall 2 weeks in March where not only did equity markets declined significantly, but you started to hear about people in my business, lenders, originators having credit facilities pulled, many went out of business completely. Many had to redesign their programs according to their credit facility requirements. And this is what we called a liquidity freeze, very similar to what we saw in 2008. And that's, when I think of liquidity freeze, this is what I think of. Of course, money doesn't actually freeze. But if you think of the secondary mortgage market, and you think of money as the gas that fuels our residential real estate and credit markets, then the secondary mortgage market is really the pipeline of that money. So in March, when banks started to pull back credit facilities and private investors disappeared from the space, all of a sudden there was a lack of money in the market. And there was really only one option at that point, and that was the federal government stepping in to shore up the liquidity issues in our environment. So the Congress came in, they passed $3 trillion money printing machine, gave some of it to the Federal Reserve to buy mortgage securities, to buy government bonds, to buy corporate bonds. And of course, Treasury got involved and came to secondary mortgage markets rescue. And that kind of really successfully kicked the can down the road for the bulk of this year. One of the questions I get quite often is, what happened? We thought there was going to be a crisis, this at the third and fourth quarter of this year, and what's going on with that? Well, when you look at some of the data I'm about to share, you'll see that the key is that what happened is government intervention was quick and swift and gargantuan. You cannot underestimate the value of pouring $3 trillion worth of printed money into a market. It's like flying over the California wildfires with a helicopter, a fire rescue helicopter, but dropping gas instead of dropping water. So there's two ways that the government got involved in this intervention. The second aspect is the moratoriums, and you've probably read about this, heard about this, and this is still a big wild card, because we know that these government moratoriums on eviction and foreclosure are due to end December 31st. So does that mean a wave of defaults and evictions will roll into the courts January 1st? And what does that mean, not only to the market, but to the courts themselves? One of the statistics I've been hearing banter around lately, and I wouldn't take my word for it, this is not an actual data point, but I'm going to drop it anyways, is that close to 40% of all tenants, meaning non-owner renters across America, are struggling in some way to make their rent payments, either through a pure default or in some sort of delay. So that is a serious issue that where the chickens will come home to roost, we believe, in the first quarter of this year, no matter what the stats are. Obviously, retail speaks for itself. It has been an absolute apocalypse. The large retailers that were already struggling because of the way the market had changed in the advent of Amazon, basically had the final knife stuck in their heart as a result of COVID. But what concerns me the most is the small business data. I found the CNBC did a very interesting article here where they used Yelp data, because pretty much most small businesses in today's market utilize Yelp. And based on a survey of Yelp data done earlier in the fall, in September, CNBC found that over 100,000 small businesses have permanently closed their doors, and over 60% of those closures due to the pandemic already will be permanent. So there's obviously an apocalypse going on in the retail operator side of things, and it goes from the large national credit operators all the way down to mom and pops. The mom and pops are what have me concerned. And so what's been the reaction to this? Well, retail had already been suffering, as I mentioned before. And the large investors, the Brookfields and the Starwoods of the world, who have equity dollars to go out and buy these properties, and then use CMBS loans, non-recourse loans, to finance these projects. Many of them have been walking away. We could get into an entire discussion about how much money some of the major players in the private equity real estate market have made in going out buying malls 10 years ago, improving the rents, decreasing the costs, going out and getting large CMBS loans, hundreds of millions of dollars of CMBS loans, where now that retail is faltering, rents have come down, and tenants aren't paying, the value of those retail malls is half what the loans are worth now. And that's what you're looking at in the CMBS market. That's why you see the CMBS default graph here, where you saw a jump in CMBS defaults from 2 to 10% in April. And that is really the leading indicator. CMBS is the market that we look to in commercial as the leading indicator for what's ahead. But what's more important for you to look at is this Federal Reserve graph. This is the overall NPL data going back 15 years. And I specifically went to this because people are constantly asking me where we're at on the cycle. And what I say is we're very similar to third or fourth quarter of 2007 right now. 13 years ago, the real estate markets were starting to slow down. Where it was different about it is that we don't have the buildup of residential inventory that we had, but certainly in terms of the number of NPLs, if you look at the two circles there, most of us didn't realize there was a crisis until the third or fourth quarter of 2008, when Lehman Brothers fell, liquidity markets froze. And then the rise of NPLs continued for another 2 years. It wasn't until second quarter of 2010 that you started to see a plateau and decline in the number of new NPLs in the marketplace. So that gives you an indication where we are in the cycle right now. The fact that you haven't seen a plethora of NPLs come to market this fourth quarter or last quarter obviously has to do with the lagging indicator and the way these markets react. It's important to understand what we're looking at. The secondary mortgage market is as it refers to mortgage loans, is a $15 trillion market. That means there's $15 trillion worth of commercial and residential mortgages out there just in the United States alone. And the largest portion of that, 212 million of that, is in residential whole loans. It's important for you to understand this because we had historically low default rates coming into COVID. Those default rates were below 3%. And in some places below 2%. So a mid-twos average default rate, which is great. We've already seen those numbers almost double just in the last 6 months since the start of COVID. But it's important as you are looking at data and as you start to hear the news over the next several months to listen to those numbers and know what they mean. When it says that when there's a 1% increase in defaults, that's 120 to 150 billion with a B new dollars of NPL non-performing loans entering the default market. They have to be worked out. They have to either be foreclosed or modified or some sort of workout, and someone's going to have to step up and do that. So it's important to understand where we're at. Let's talk about residential forbearances because there's been a lot of talk in the news about this. And a lot of the coverage, I don't think really paints the picture accurately as to how this residential mortgage forbearance plan program is going. What's going on there is that you see articles about 4.5 million homeowners going into forbearance in the spring. And since then, we've seen a decrease in the number of of loans in forbearance. So it looks like a good thing by the way media is reporting. Oh, 650,000 new loans came off forbearance October 1st. We heard that statistic. What that statistic didn't tell you, and what the data from Black Knight will, is that while 650,000 people came off forbearance, there were supposed to be 2 million loans coming off forbearance October 1st. So 1,350,000 had to go back to their servicer and ask for another 3 months, which means, and of the 650 that came off forbearance, there's no telling what percentage of those will actually can be able to make up the payments and get back on track. As a matter of fact, we're seeing an increasing number of those forbearances go into default. Of the 2 million loans that have gone on to and come off of residential forbearance programs, almost 400,000 of those loans are already past due and heading into default. So the signs are troubling. The signs in residential real estate, I think this graph on the bottom left here, presented by the chief economist at Black Knight. They're one of the leading residential mortgage servicers. They are the largest provider of data and mortgage servicing platforms for investors in the residential field. That graph gives the whole picture. While the delinquency numbers decreased and the number of cases in the court seemed to be dwindling, these are all factors of A, forbearance, and B, moratoriums. If you can't foreclose, then all you have to do as a servicer is forbear. And so there is a huge shadow inventory of over 2 million loans that are up again for a forbearance end at the end of December. So keep an eye on that stuff. It's important to understand that servicers on government insured loans actually have to still make payments to the government, still have to cover a lot of the cost of managing those loans. So what happens is a lot of those servicers and investors are just going to get tired of carrying the load, and they're going to exit through NPL sales. We are already starting to see this now. We saw a huge rush of it this summer when the liquidity freeze hit. We were able to purchase about $35 million, a mix of owner-occupied and investor loans, deals, some of the best deals we've seen in over 10 years. We've been able to back our bid up, add timeline, buy things 10 to 15 points cheaper than where we were bidding and buying in January, February of this year. The other idea is that as a whole loan investor, if you're a bank or somebody who's buying loans for the cash flow, the mark-to-market value of that loan to somebody who's looking for cash flow is zero from a banking and regulation perspective. So that's why you heard about banks adding more reserves to cover some of the loans they were expecting to go bad. But you and I know, if I buy the first lien on a residential mortgage, that there's an actual value underneath that. And so what we do is we have an extensive modeling program that takes into consideration the underlying collateral value of the mortgage. And then we pay a percentage of that. If that means 80% of the unpaid principal balance or 30% of the unpaid principal balance, we focus on the collateral. And then we look to exit strategies. We look to, as private equity players in this market, we have flexibility that other investors, banks, and regulated institutions don't have. So, for instance, the largest portion of our resolutions are not an exit from the property. 40% of our borrowers get reperformed. We like to keep people in their homes, and then we have the ability to resell that reperforming paper. So that's where the lifeboat to individual borrowers comes in. We take a real different approach. We go to our borrowers individually. We like to say we manage trees and not forests. And we ask the borrowers how they would see this resolved. This has worked out very well for us over the years, as I mentioned some of our results. It's an intricate process that we follow in our management, but it's one that helps borrowers and obviously has shown some very significant returns to our investors. That's all I have to say. We hope that this has been an informative session here this morning. If you'd like some more insight, if you have any individual questions, more insight into the state of the secondary mortgage market, the residential mortgage pending foreclosure crisis, and any perspectives on commercial, feel free to reach out to me. I thank you so much for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Bymel, thank you so much for being able to come out and present for us again. If you have any further questions for Bill, definitely feel free to reach out to him directly using the messaging features on the Engage's platform, and definitely go check out his booth. But with that being said, we are going to just take a quick break again. We're going to be back over here in just about 4 minutes now at 12:10 p.m. For our next standalone presentation, which is famed an Institution of Innovation and Execution. We'll see everyone back over here in just about 4 minutes. Thank you so much.